Okay, today we're going to be learning Yoma Daf Yud Tet. Today's daf will be in memory of all those who were killed in the Stampede in Meron last night, and for a terrible tragedy, and for washing them off for all those injured. We are praying for everybody. Today's daf is also sponsored by Heather's Side. I'm so blessed to have a partner who is also my chavruta. I love you, Sammy. Thank you for encouraging me to do daf yomi. I've already gotten so much out of the experience. Okay. So now we're going to start our daf with we started a Mishnah yesterday that the Zkenei Beitin they give the Kohen off to the Zkenei Kuna, and they take him to Beit Avtinas, and before they go, they make him swear. Okay, so we're going to talk about first what he does at Beit Avtinas, where Beit Avtinas is, and then why they made him swear. So the Gemara starts off and says, Tana at the top of our page, Lelamdo Chafina. The reason they bring him to Beit Avtinas is to teach him how to do this, the whole work of the Ktoret, the incense. The incense is a very central part. Okay, the pasuk says, we'll see this later, but that you're supposed to bring the Ktoret into the Kodesh Kodeshim. In other words, it doesn't really say you're supposed to bring it in. It says, right, Kiba anan era'el akaporet. I'm going to be viewed. You're going to see me through this cloud. And we'll see soon what the debate between the Prushim and the Tzdukim, the Sadducees and the Pharisees was. But the idea is he has to learn how to do this, and particularly he has to learn how to do it according to the way the Prushim say, because they're Prushim and that's what they're trying to show him. Amar Rav Papa, Shtei l'shakot hayu lo l'kohen gadol. Echat l'shkat paradrin ve'echat l'shkat Beit Avtinas. There were two main places where the Kohen Gadol was, okay, especially in that week, right? So we're in that week. And he would practice, how to do the Ktoret, and he would go from the Lishkat Paradrin to the Lishkat Beit Avtinas. So now they say one was a Chapet Safon and a Chapet Darom. One was in the north and one was in the south. This is Rav Papa speaking. And Rav Papa says, right, these were the two main places where the Kohen Gadol spent his time in these days. And one was in the north, one was in the south. Now we're going to prove first how we know that one was in the north and one was in the south. But we're not going to yet know. Rav Papa's going to say, I don't know which one is where. He's going to try to prove it, and then he's going to be proven wrong. And it must be the opposite. Okay. And our map shows the opposite of what Rav Papa wanted to say. So for this, you need the map. Okay. So if you have a map, you can use it. I'll show it up in the video. And in addition, there's pictures. Unfortunately, the pictures were not up yet this morning on the Portal Daf Yomi site. So hopefully they'll be up there at some point, and I'll be able to put them up on our site. Otherwise, I'm going to show you them through the video, which the pictures are not necessary, but they're very helpful for kind of viewing. What's good about the map is they show where the location is. These pictures that are in the back of the Morot Daf Yomi Gemara, which are normally on the Portal Daf Yomi, they just show you like a visual picture of what it looked like, which just gives you, again, obviously no one knew exactly what it looked like, but based on tradition, they come up with a kind of view of what they look like, and it'll help you kind of visualize these rooms and what they look like. So we're going to have a whole discussion right now, a very long-winded section. It's going to take almost the whole daf about where things were in the temple. And from there, we're going to see that in both, first they're going to mention the ones in the north, then they're going to mention the ones in the south, and both seem to mention a lishka that was for the Kohen Gadol, which is going to obviously be relating to these two that we talked about. The Beit Avtinas, if you remember, they were the family that made the incense. So it makes sense that the Lishkat Beit Avtinas, where the incense was made, and that's where they had it, that's where they would show him and teach him how he was supposed to do it. So now let's see. Chapet Safon, Chapet Darom. So a Chapet Safon, the one in the north, Ditnan, Shesh l'shakot hayu b'azara. So there were 6 chambers. Shalosh b'tzafon v'shalosh b'darom. 3 in the north and 3 in the south. So now we're going to go through all the chambers. Shebedarom. Okay, there's also a sheet today, which the sheet also helps you organize a little bit. Everything organized in a little bit of a different way. Shebedarom lishkat hamelach, lishkat haparva, lishkat hamedichim. Okay, so now we're on the south side, which again on this map is at the top part of the map. And here are the 3. So we're right now, if you look at the whole map, so we've entered in from the east into the Ezrat Nashim. We now go from there, we cross into the Azara. Everything we're going to discuss today is in the Azara itself. And here are the 3 chambers, okay? So the first chamber is the salting chamber, the Lishkat HaMelach, where we're going to see it inside now in a second. Lishkat melach, shesham hayu notnim melach lakorban. They needed to salt the meat for the sacrifices. So they would put the salt, it was a salt storage room. Lishkat medichim, Lishkat parva is the next one. Shesham hayu molchin orot hakodashim. Here they would salt the hides of the animals right next door. Lishkata, right, it was another thing they used the salt for. Lishkata medichim, shesham hayu medichim kirvei kodashim. They would wash out the innards, right? The innards of the animal were full of feces and other things. So they would have to wash them out. That's the washing chamber right next door. Okay, so those are those three. Now, lishkat, now what's important for our purposes? Misham misiba ola legad beta parva. There was a spiral staircase that went up from the middle of the lishkat parva, which was the center one. From here, you would go upstairs, and at the top, there was a mikveh. So there was this extra level above the middle one. And that's where there was this mikveh that we're going to get to. Okay, so there was a mikveh, it went up to the mikveh. Shalosh shebetzafon. Okay, so those are the three chambers in the north. Shalosh shebetzafon, lishkata etz. Oh, before I do this, let me just show you some pictures because here they show you a little bit to visualize what this looked like. So here you have the three chambers. Okay, here you can see it better in a picture. There's like a building, three different chambers that were separated obviously on the inside. And at the top of the middle one, there's a roof, you know, a little second story with obviously a mikveh inside. You can't see the spiral staircase in the picture, but you get the idea. Okay, so that's that. Now, let's move on to the three that are in the north. So shalosh shebetzafon, lishkata etz, lishkata gola, and lishkata gazit. Lishkata etz, amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, shachachti ma'etam shameshet. Now, if you're looking at your map, you're not going to see anything called lishkata etz, so don't try looking for it. So hold off. So now the first thing is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, I don't know what the lishkata etz was, but the important part for our purposes and the whole reason why we brought this whole long source, until now we haven't yet dealt with any of it, wasn't relevant yet. We were trying to say one in the tzafon was the lishka for the Kohen Gadol, one of these places, either lishka paradrin or lishka beit avtinas. So Abba Shalom Omer, lishkat Kohen Gadol aita. Lishkat ha'etz was the lishka for the Kohen Gadol. The right, which means, well, we don't know. It's either lishka paradrin or it's lishka beit avtinas because you have the map in front of you. You know that it's the paradrin because the paradrin is on the north. Now I see someone's writing now. It is very important. Do not confuse the lishkata etz with lishkata etzim. Okay, lishkata etzim was at the northeast corner of the Ezrat Nashim. We're not in the Ezrat Nashim now. We're in the Azara. Okay, we're talking about three chambers on the north side of the Azara. This outside was where they kept the wood. And if you remember, the Kohanim Baalei Mumim would go through the wood and take out all the worms from it. That's not what we're talking about. That's something else. That's the lishkata etzim. That's not the one we're referring to. We're referring to these three chambers over here. Okay, so this is lishkata gola. There's a big hole. We'll see why in a minute. Big circle, I should say. Then there's lishkat paradlin. So you already know what the answer is going to be. Although at this point, you're not supposed to know that. But this is the chamber where the Kohen Gadol is, either Beit Avtinas or paradlin. And then this is lishkata gazit over here. So over here, if you're not looking, I'll explain to you. First, okay, so lishkata gazit is actually right in the border between the Ezrat Yisrael and the Ezrat Kohanim. And so it's the beginning of the Azara. Then you get further in the room, you get to Lishkat Paradrin. Further in the room, you get to this Lishkata Gola. So according to Abba Shaul, Lishkata Eitz was the place where the Kohen Gadol was. In other words, the Ravid says it's because it was built out of wood. The Rambam says you can't build anything out of wood in the temple, not possible. Anyway, big debate about that. So now, otherwise, they don't really know why it's called Lishkata Eitz. The Lishkat Kohen Gadol, it was behind them, which probably seems to mean it was jutting out less into the room than they were. Ugag shloshtan shaven, the roof of all of them, they all had the same height, basically. Lishkat Gola, so what were they used for? Sham hayabor hagola, v'galgal natun alav, u'misham espikim mayim lekol azara. They dug a well, the Gola. What's the Gola? The exile. The people who came back from exile dug a big bore in a big pit in order to have water. So they dug deep down, they got to water, and they used that water. That was the water that was used to basically take care of any water needs in the temple, which there were a lot of. And there was a Gilgal on top of it, right? A pulley system to pull the water out. And from there, they would give water to anything needed in the Azara. Lishkat Gazit, what was there? Okay, it means hewn stone chamber. It was probably made of hewn stone. Shamayta Sanhedrin Shel Yisrael Yoshevet Bedana et Kohanim. This is where the Sanhedrin would rule the Kohanim. For what purpose did they need to rule the Kohanim? This is how we say things are black and white. So if the Sanhedrin ruled that you were disqualified and you couldn't be a Kohen, let's say they determined that the woman you were married to was a divorcee, you can't function as Kohen anymore. So you would wear black clothes and you walk out. If you didn't, if the Sanhedrin decided you weren't disqualified, you would wear white clothing and wrap yourself in white clothing. Remember, and then you would work with your Kohanim brothers. In other words, this was important to be in the Azara so they could rule about Kohanim if they were disqualified or not. Okay, it could be another reason they were there, which we're going to see later, is part of the Prushit-Stuki conflict and the rabbi saying we need a place in the temple where we can make sure that things are going the way we want them to be. So I think that's another good reason as to why, because it might seem a little bit strange, why was the Sanhedrin, the big court, inside the Azara? That seems a little bit weird. It makes sense also, by the way, that it was partly in the Israel so that everyone can come into that lishka, right? They can be in there. Achat badarom. Okay, so that was all approved for how do we know one of the lishakot was b'tzafon. The real only line we needed there was Abba Shal's line about the Lishkat Kohen Gadol was there on the north side. Now we're going to find the one that was on the south. Achat b'darom ditnan. Shiv'a sha'arim hayu ba'azara. Shlosha b'tzafon v'shlosha b'darom. Ve'echad b'mizrach. Okay, so here we have gates. Okay, here's 1, 2, 3 gates. Okay, there's actually a fourth if you see on the south side. Okay, we're going to ignore that one for some reason. There's 3 here, and then there's 3 on the other. There's actually also 4 on the other side, but we're going to talk about these 3 for whatever reason. Okay, again, I don't know why I guess there must have been different opinions about whether there was an extra gate, and the one on the east. So let's talk about these sha'arim. Shebadarom, in the south side, we have Shar Hadleka. Okay, we saw this before. We saw all these in Masechet Shkalim. Okay, the gate of the kindling, which some people say was the Shar Hadelek, which is where they would bring, likely they think they brought the wood into the Azara through here. Okay, then the next one is Shar Shenilo, Shar HaKorban, which is really not HaKorban. There's a note there that changes it. Shar HaBechorot. Okay, it was they bring in the Bechorot and all the Kodshim Kalim for slaughtering, they would bring them in from the south side. That's because if you remember, Kodshe Kodshim, highest sanctity, Shchitatam B'tzafon in the north. But the ones of lower sanctity, you could do in the south. So therefore, they would bring them in through the south. The next one is Shlishilo Shal Hamayim. Okay, that's where they would bring in the water. Okay, this is the one closest to the entrance to the Azara. We're going more eastward. This is where they would bring in the water for the Nisuch Hamayim on Sukkot, the water libations. And the reason they say is because it's the closest gate to the Mizbeach. So it makes sense. They wanted to carry the water straight to the altar. Okay, next. Sheba Mizrach, on the east, Shar Nikanor, Ushte L'Shakot Yusham, Echad B'Yamino, V'Echad B'Smolo. There were 2 chambers right next to the big gate of the Nikanor gate. We talked about the Nikanor gate. He brought them over, if you remember, over through water right from Alexandria, and then one started to sink, right? They had to throw them off. The boat was sinking. Anyway, the whole story there, we're not going to get back into it, but it was a miraculous thing that happened, and it was called Shar Nikanor in his name. And there were 2 l'shakot, Echad b'yamino, Echad b'smalo, 2 little chambers there. Echad l'shkat pinchas hamalbish, one for the person who dressed everyone, probably kept the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. Ve'echad l'shkat oseh chavitin. This is where they would make the minchat chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, and also the regular Kohanim on their first day of initiation, they would need to do it there. So here's a picture of the Shar Nikanor and the 2, right, on the 2 sides. Okay, you have these 2 little chambers. Okay, here's, by the way, a picture of the other 3 that we saw before, the Lishkat Gazit, Lishkat Gola, and Lishkat Paradrim. Okay, here are pictures of it. Yeah. Moving back to our Gemara. All these different pictures. Okay, next. Shabbat Safon, Shar Nitzotz, Binyan Achsadra Haya. Okay, this is good to have a picture. The Shar Nitzotz was in Achsadra. That means it was a portico. So it was built, it had 2 levels basically. There was the bottom and then there was the part up top. What would they use this gate for? Va'aliyah b'nuyah al gabav, there was a roof, like a second level on top. V'sham kohanim shomrim milamala u'leviim milamata. There's a whole diyun in Midot about why some were above and some were below, but apparently they did shmirot here and watches. And you can see from this picture, okay, here's a picture imagining what it looked like. There's the gate. You go up these steps, and up there's a little porch there, and that's where they would guard from the top, and also people would guard from the bottom. It's a little bit of a debate about where everyone was guarding from and why you needed guards at the top and guards at the bottom, but we're not going to get into that right now. And why it was called Shara Nitzotz is another question. Okay. Okay, and on the other side of it was the chel. Sheni lo shar hakorban. The next is, right now there's one side the chel, one side the azara. The chel is that part that went right around the azara. And the whole, also the Ezrat Nashim. Sheni lo shar hakorban. This is the one that's called shar hakorban because it's on the north side, which is where they did the slaughtering. So they would bring the animals through the shar hakorban. Shlishi lo shar beit hamoked. That goes into the beit hamoked room that we saw before. Vitanya, and it says in a Braita, there were 5 dippings in the mikveh that the Kohen Gadol did on Yom Kippur, and there were 10 kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, which we're going to see later, which is washing his hands and feet. Bikulam bakodesh al gag beit haparva, and all of them were done on that roof of the beit haparva that we saw before, that on the other side. Chutz mizo shaita bechol al gabe shar hamayim. Only one was done, not in the kodesh, in the chol, outside the azara, which was on top of the shar hamayim. U b'tzad lishkato haita. Okay, now the shar hamayim, is on. Okay, so the issue is right now we don't really know. Okay, one was by the shar hamayim, and it was in. Okay, the shar hamayim is on the south side. Right, we know that's the shar hamayim. And therefore, they then say, and that's where, this is the important line, he would go to the mikveh there, and it says, ubitzad lishkato haita, and it was right next to his chamber. Okay, so now, the mikveh that he goes in the morning, the first tefillah he does in the morning, in order to go into the azara, you have to do a tefillah in the mikveh. So the first tefillah out of all those 5 tefillot he does, the first one was done in the chol, near the shar hamayim, which was right near his lishka. So now you see the shar hamayim is on the south, and he had a lishka next to it. So we proved that he had a lishka in the south, and we proved that he had one in the north. The lo yadana comes for Papa to say, I don't know, lishkat paradim b'tzafon v'lishkat betaftinas b'darom, or lishkat betaftinas b'tzafon v'lishkat paradim b'darom. Okay, but I don't know which one was which. Okay, and that's the whole question. So now we're going to try to figure out which one was which. So as I said, Papa is going to say the opposite of what we have in our map and the opposite of the conclusion of the Gemara. It seems that Lishkat Paradrim must have been in the south. Why? My timer. Well, let's go through the daily activities of the Kohen Gadol that week. He would wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom, and then go to the mikveh. Now, the mikveh we just said was by the shar hamayim in the south side. Now, the assumption is he wakes up in the morning. If we say the Lishkat Paradrim is in the south, he wakes up in the morning, and right next door to him is the mikveh. He goes to the mikveh. Then he crosses over the azara to the other side. He goes to the other lishka, the Beit Avtinas, and he learns how to do the Ktoret. And then he goes to the mikdash and does the avodah all day long. As it gets close to nighttime, what happens? Late afternoon, remember, according to Rabbi Akiva, we would sprinkle him every single day and toward the evening, so that if you say that he becomes tameh, if he was tahor, the sprinkling makes him tameh, then the bahade panya madwale, so close to evening, they would sprinkle the paraduma water on him. V'hadar azal darom. Now, after he does that, he has to go to the mikveh again. He goes to the darom, to the south side, vitavil, he dunks there, and then naich, and then he goes back to where he, to sleep now, or to rest. Now, this would be very smart. Right? Maktin kayu mesach raglava azal darom v'tav. Sorry. Okay, 1 second. Right. So then, if you want to say Lishkat Paradrim was in the south, Then let's go through order of his day if it was in the south, and we're going to see that that doesn't make a lot of sense geographically. If, right, he's going to wake up in the morning, then he's going to have to cross over the whole courtyard. Now, you might say this doesn't sound like such a big deal, but I feel like this is a big deal. He's going to cross over to the other side. He's going to then dunk, go learn chafina on that side. Because the Beit Avtinas is on that side. He's going to then go, right, after he's going to go get sprinkled, then go to the south, and then then he's going to have to cross all the way over to the other side in order to go to rest. Are we going to bother him this much to go do that? In other words, it's a big tircha for him at the end of the day to make him cross all the way over. It makes more sense that he finishes there, dunks on that side, and goes right to sleep right next door, right? He gets to rest immediately after. It's been a long day for him. So it doesn't make sense that we'd make him cross over at the end of the day to go all the way back home to where he's sleeping. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? That's a bad proof. Alamalo, why not? We want to make him work hard. He's not coming to, it's not a spa. It's not a chill out place. He's got to work. And why? For two reasons. To eat stukihu, lifrosh. First of all, if he's at stuki, we want to make him work hard and maybe he'll quit. If he's at stuki who wants to do what the stukim do, we want to discourage that. So let's work the kohanim gedolim hard so that unless they're really in this for the right reasons, they're not really going to do it. Inami, or another reason, shelo tazuach da'ato alav, so he doesn't become arrogant. He doesn't say, oh, look, everyone's making it easy for me. No, he realizes he has to work hard, right? Just because you're in a high position doesn't mean we make everything easy for you. You have to, remember where you came from and remember that nothing comes easy. Because if you didn't say that, now, we assume right now, we're working on this assumption that one is in the north and one is in the south. That's a correct assumption. However, comes the Gemara to say, well, why did it have to be that way? If you really wanted to make his life easier, where he sleeps and where he studies should all be in the same place. And then they would have made them one right next to the other. The fact that they put one in the tzafon and one in the room proves that the whole idea is to make him walk around. And inami, alternatively, you could say tiskele b'chada, or forget about putting them both next to each other. They could have just had one chamber. He could have slept in that place and learned about the Torah in that place. So the fact that one is in the north and one is in the south, and they're already separated from each other, is good proof that it's not going to prove to us which one is where because we're trying to make his life easier. No, that doesn't hold. And that's why in the end they conclude against Rav Papa, and maybe they have other reasons for believing this, that again, just to review, the Beit Avtinas was in the the south. It's confusing with this map because it's opposite. The Beit Avtinas was in the south, and the Lishkat Paridjalin was in the north. Okay. Okay. So now, I see. I actually knew why the Beit HaNitzotz. Someone's saying that the Beit HaNitzotz was because the light would come through there. That was one reason. Thanks. I couldn't remember the reasons. It wasn't coming to me. Either because the light came through there, and that's where they would see when the sun came out, when the sun came in, which was important to know. Although we'll see later that other ways that we came up with when the sun came out. And some people say because there was a small fire that they would leave there all the time, and from there they would light. If for some reason the fire went out on the altar, they would use the fire from there to light. I'm pretty sure there's even another reason, but they didn't come to mind while I was teaching right now. Okay. Thank you for helping me out. Okay, now we're back to this big ma'amad where they basically come and they say to him, listen, okay, let's go back to the words. We're the representatives of the court. You're our representative, like of all the people, and shluchei beitin, and you're a representative of the court. And therefore, we're going to make you swear, right, in the name of God, you're not going to do anything different from the way we taught. So first the Gemara says, look at their language. They call him our shaliach. Now this is a classic example where they're looking from a very halachic perspective at something. that maybe wasn't really meant to be that way, but they say, maybe the wording in this Mishnah seems to disprove what Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, says. The Amar Rav Huna b'reit Rav Yeshua, Hane kahane shluchei derachmananim, Hane kohane shluchei derachmananim. The Kohanim are representatives of God, they're messengers of God, not messengers of the people. How do we know this? For halachic reasons. If we're going to say there are messengers, a shaliach means a messenger. What does a messenger mean? It means they're doing something that you could do, but you're not doing, and they're doing it in place of you. Now, the Kohen Gadol is receiving atonement for our sins in a particular manner, right? He does all these sacrifices. He cannot do something that we can't ourselves do. He can only be a messenger, an agent for us, if he's doing what we can do ourselves. And then he's acting as our agent to do it for us. But we can't do what he does. So it can't be that he's really considered our messenger. Like in, halachic terminology, that's what an agent means. Someone who does something instead of you when you could have done it yourself. So therefore, it doesn't make sense that they call him shluchenu. So if they call him shluchenu, they must disagree with this statement of Rav Huna about messengers. So they say no. Even though they say you're our shaliach, what they're really saying is we are making you swear in our name and right in the dot of the community and the dot of the court. In other words, your swearing is done in our name, which means like don't swear in your own name or something like that, where you're going to basically switch your swear to be like a stuki kind of swear. It's according to our rules. And therefore, don't understand it the way it sounded. You're our agent. No, it didn't exactly mean that. Now we finally get to hu poreshu bocher behem porshinu bochin. So now he goes off and cries and they go off and cry. What does that mean? What, they all have to cry? No, we talked about this in the beginning of the Masechet, that these are what we call descriptive mishnayot, which means they're describing partly what's supposed to happen and partly what may happen or what maybe did happen once or twice or maybe 3 times, but not that they have to cry. It's not like everybody has to start crying. It's just that this could be a possible reaction to this whole swearing episode. Why? So he starts crying because they accused him of being a tzduki. Imagine you're a Prushi Kohen Gadol and they start accusing you and make you swear. You feel like, what, you're not trusting me? It's embarrassing. Why did they cry? Anyone who accuses, right, there's a very famous line, anyone who accuses someone who's actually not guilty is going to get punished, and by bodily punishment will come to him. So, right, something bad will happen to his body. This is a way of saying, right, people don't enjoy, it's not, they're upset that they had to suspect someone who maybe is perfectly a good person and about to do the right thing anyway. Right? It's never good when you start reprimanding someone who actually didn't do what you thought they did wrong. What's this all about? Okay, what does this mean? So this is the whole issue between the Prushim and the Tzdukim. We can look at Rashi. Rashi says, Mi bachutz. What happens? The Kohen's supposed to go into the Kodesh Kodeshim and burn the incense, and a big smoke comes up, right? The pasuk says, God says to Moshe, Daber al Aharon achicha, go tell Aharon, va'al yavo b'chol et el kodesh. You can't just come anytime you want into the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies. Mibeit la parochet el pnei hakaporet asher al Aharon v'lo yamut. You can't just go anytime, otherwise you'll die. Ki ba'anan era'el hakaporet. I will appear with a cloud of smoke, meaning there's going to be a smoke screen between you and me when you go in there. So the debate is like this. According to the Prushim, he would walk into with his, right, he's got his pan with the coals in it, and then he's got the incense in the other hand, and he puts the incense onto the pan, and it goes up in a smoke. According to the Tzdukim, that's all done outside before he goes in. According to the Prushim, he actually goes in, he can actually see the Kodesh Kodeshim for a moment, and then he lights up the smoke. But according to the Tzdukim, that all happens outside. So let's read Rashi. Rashi says, they would say, Al yavo ki'im ba'anan. That's the only way I'll be seen is with a cloud. So they understood Umashma ki ba'anan ashan haktoret yavo. And it'll only appear after the smoke is there. So don't go into the room unless the smoke is already going. So walk in with the smoky fire. And the Prushim said, no, that's not the way we understand the pasuk. They had a tradition that that's not the way it goes. So that's the big machloket, which is a big idea, right? Can you actually go in and see something, or does the whole thing have to be entirely blocked? It's almost like a, right, there's no way the Stukim thought that you could see anything. As I said, Shuli wrote a whole article about this on our site, Shuli Mishkin, in flashback, so you can read about the Prushit Stukim in general and when all sorts of historical facts about it. So now, Amarlo, sorry, I skipped something. Okay, now we're going to see a story about a Tzduki who did the avoda like the Tzdukim do, and then we'll see obviously what the Gemara is going to say happened to him. So we have a Braita. Tanu Rabbanan. Maaseh b'tzduki echad she'itkimi b'chutz v'chnis. He did it all outside and brought the incense already smoking up inside. B'yitziato haya sameach simcha gdola. He was so thrilled when he was done. So excited. We'll see why in a minute. Paga bo aviv. His father sees him. Amar lo b'ni. Right. The father realizes what happened. He says to him, listen, afapi, it's a great line. Afapi shetzduki manu. Even though we are Sadducees, mityarim anu min aprushim. We're fearful of the Pharisees. They're in charge here. They rule. They determine. We're in fear of them. You can't just do what you want. Amar lo. So the son responds and says, listen, kol yamai hayiti mitzte'er ala mikaze. All my life I was upset about this pasuk. Ki ba'anan erel kaporet. Amarti, what was I upset about? Matai yavoli adiva kaimeni. He said, that pasuk, it bothered me. I wanted so much to fulfill that pasuk according to our interpretation. Achshav shabal yadi loa kaimenu. So I finally have the opportunity and I'm not going to do it. So, of course, classic Gemara, what happens? Or this is a Braita actually, but they say, Amru, lo hayu yamim muatim, or classic Talmudic story, I would say, or Tanaitic story. Lo hayu yamim muatim ad shemet. Not very long passed before he died, obviously. Vihu tal ba'ashpan, his body was thrown into the garbage dump. Bayu tola'in yotzi mechotmo, and worms were coming out of his nostrils. I think the idea of the worms, right, is we talked about how worms can never go on the altar, and that's why the wood has to be cleaned from the worms. And this idea of, what wasn't supposed to go in went in, and how it was all wrong, and that's why his death showed how wrong he was. Some people say, which is what you probably would have expected the story to say, he automatically got plagued as soon as he walked out of the Kodesh Kodeshim, right? It happened kind of immediately. You'd expect, like lightning to strike you, right? Something like that. Ditani Rabbi Chia, as Rabbi Chia said in the Braita, Kemin kol nishma ba'azara. There was this sound all of a sudden in the Azara on that day. Sheba malach v'chavato panav. The malach came and slapped him in the face, or stepped on him on the face. The Kohanim came in, they heard this loud scream, they walked in and they saw a footprint of a calf between his shoulders. Shneimar, what's this footprint of a calf? In the description, the famous description, Masemer Kavav Yecheskel, he describes the angels as their foot is like the foot of a calf. So basically they say, that's why it was the angel's step, the angel that basically stepped on him and killed him. Okay, so first of all, I want you to remember this kol nishma ba'azara, the kol of him dying, this very loud voice. At the end of tomorrow's daf, there's going to be the idea of these loud noises, and one of them is going to be the kol of the sound of the neshama, the soul leaving the body, and the loud ring of death. So anyway, I want you to keep that in mind when you see it tomorrow, to think about this stuff also. Amar of Zcharia ben Kfuta. Okay, now we're off topic. That was it. You would have expected them to say more about the Prushim and the Stukim. I can't recall if there's more about it later, but right now we'll discuss and we'll see what they're going off on a different tangent now, totally off topic. The Mishnah had said that they would read to the Kohen Gadol from parts of the Tanakh, and Zcharia ben Kfuta said, I would often read to him from Daniel. So Amar of Zcharia ben Kfuta. Matne le Rav Hanan bar Rava lechia bar Rav kamei de Rav. So Rav Hanan bar Rava said to Chia bar Rav in front of Rav, Amar Rav Zcharia ben Kfuta. He said pay instead of bet. Okay, right? There's people who can't pronounce bet and they say pay instead. So he had some issues, he needed some help, maybe a clean itik shoret, a language therapist, speech therapist. He couldn't say it properly, or he learned it improperly. So Rav was there and heard him say it, and he gestures to him, kfutal. I don't know exactly how he said, say kfutal instead of kfutal. I don't know how he gestured to him, but somehow he made a gesture. Maybe he made the letter bet with his hands, and I don't know what, but he tried to say, it should be said bet. To which the Gemara asks, V'nemer le-memer, why didn't he just say it straight out? Why did he gesture to him? So the answer is Kriyat Shema Habakari. He must have been in the middle of Kriyat Shema. To which the Gemara says, Ki agavna mishare. Are you allowed to do that in the middle of Kriyat Shema? Gesture to someone? V'hamar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta. He said, A korei Shema lo yirmos be'einav v'lo yikotz b'siftotav v'lo yoreh be'etzvotav. You can't hint with your eyes. You can't use your mouth, your lips. You can't use your fingers. You can't gesture at all. Vitanya, and also it was said, Rabbi Elazar Chamsa Omer, Chisma Omer, HaKorei Shema u'meramez be'einav u'mekaretz b'siftotav u'mareh be'etzvo. If you do any of those things, use your eyes, your lips, your fingers to gesture to someone. Alava katuv Omer v'lo oti karata Yaakov. You didn't call me Yaakov. You didn't call me properly. You didn't read Kriyat Shema properly. Okay, this is a big problem. So if that's the case, how did he do this? Rav, right? The Rav who we saw yesterday, who maybe was involved in some problematic activity. Well, okay, but anyway, Rav we know is a great gadol, especially if you go with what I said yesterday. So now the answer, lo kasha, ha beperek rishon, ha beperek sheni. There's a difference, and we learned this in Brachot, difference between the first paragraph of Shema and the second paragraph. The first paragraph, no interruptions whatsoever. The second paragraph, you can. It's not a big deal if you make you do gestures. Tano Rabbanan. Since we're on Kriyat Shema, we're going to darshan some words of Kriyat Shema, v'dibarta bam, specifically the words, and you should speak of these. So bam v'lo b'tfilah. These you say out loud, but when it comes to tfilah, which is the Amidah, which is Shmon Esrei, that you say silently. That's why that's it. Silently in Kriyat Shema, you could say out loud. V'dibarta bam yesh lecha reshut l'daber v'lo b'dvarim acherim. You can speak words of Torah, but you can't speak other things. We'll get to it in a minute. Rabbi Acha Omer v'dibarta bam aseh otan keva v'al taseh maran. Make these things keva. These should be the main part of your life and not something temporal. Amar Rava hasach sichat chulin over ba'aseh. Anyone who speaks a sichat that's not a high-level learning Torah conversation, over ba'aseh, overrides a mitzvah aseh. Shenemar v'dibarta bam v'lo b'dvarim acherim. This is a mitzvah aseh, he says, that you have to speak words of Torah, and if you speak other words, you're not fulfilling a mitzvah, a positive command. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Omer over b'lav. It's a lo tasevin. It's a negative commandment, which is worse. Shene'emal, and it's very strange because he's not bringing a verse from the Torah. He's bringing a verse from Kohelet, which is very strange. He'd be using that to say it's a mitzvah lo taseh. Shene'emar kol advarim yigeim lo yuchal ish ledaber. To say anything that's not Torah yigeim, make you that are. I'm trying to think about how exactly to translate that, but certainly the pshat is not the way they're understanding it. They're saying anything that's not sanctified, lo yuchal ish ledaber. You're not allowed to speak. Okay? Now, it's very difficult. We all have conversations that are chulin. How do we relate to this? Good question, right? And I assume the aseh and lo taseh aren't meant here in the halachic terminology of positive and negative commandments because it's a bit exaggerated here. But the idea is they're trying to say, right, one should try to engage in words of Torah. Why are they talking about this here? What does this have to do with anything? So I think that it's a little bit connected to the previous section, which was this whole accusation of the Kohen Gadol and how it has to be done gently, right? In the Mishnah, they started all crying. It wasn't done in a great way, right? Maybe they should have hinted to him, alluded to him, right? Sometimes you have to say things explicitly because you can't leave anything to chance. If you hint to someone, they might not necessarily understand you. On the other hand, sometimes, maybe Rav didn't want to embarrass him. Like often if someone, has something on their face, so you kind of, make a little note, there's other people around, you don't want them to, or something in between their teeth, and you kind of make a little, you don't want to start saying there's something in between your teeth that'll humiliate someone. So I think it's talking about this idea that they just humiliated the Kohen Gadol, but don't learn from here that you can do this normally. You have to watch your words. You have to be careful how you speak. You have to, and maybe sometimes gestures, maybe not in the middle of Kriyat Shema, but maybe there's other times where gestures are appropriate. So anyway, it's an interesting conversation, totally off what we were talking about, but maybe it somehow connects. Okay, last part for today. Now we're moving on to the night of Yom Kippur. even they don't say this, but the Kohen Gadol is not supposed to sleep, and that's obvious from what it says here. Bikesh leitnamnem, if he wanted to drift off into sleep, they would keep him up all night because they were worried that maybe he would see Carrie, that he would have a seminal emission, and therefore, bikesh leitnamnem, if he wanted to fall asleep, pirchei kuna makim lefanav be'etzrat tzrada, with a finger at strada. We're going to see what this is in a minute. I'll already tell you it means they snapped. Okay, they would snap at him to wake him up. V'omrim lo, ishi kohen gadol amod, stand up. Ba'feg, and get rid of your sleep. Achat al haritzpa, put one on the floor. See what exactly that means. Sounds like a yoga position of like tree pose. We're going to see it is yoga, but it's not tree pose. U'ma'asikino to ad she'yagia zman hashchita, and they keep him busy until the time for shchita arrives, which is the morning. First activity he's supposed to do in the morning. So ma'etzrada, what does this mean? Amar Rav Yehuda, sarata dida. It means the rival of this one. Okay, like the second wife is the rival. So what does it mean? And what's Maihi Gudal? Gudal is the agudal, the thumb, and they're saying the rival of the thumb, which is either the second finger, but it's not so easy to snap with your second finger. So most people say it means the third finger, okay, and that you would snap with your third finger and you would try to wake him up like that. Rav Huna tried to show what this is, and this big sound burst out in the Beit Midrash. Everybody heard what his snap. Okay, I don't have the loudest snap. Okay, but some people have a much louder snap than that, and it was this big loud boom, and it sounds like that big loud noise that happened when the Kohen Gadol died, right? And like I said, we're going to get back to these big loud noises tomorrow stuff. So keep it in mind, this connection of all these loud noises. What they said to him is, do something new. Maihi, what is that? They said to him, show us how to do a kida. Kida is a type of bowing, which seems from Masechet Sukkah, there's a description where he puts his hands on the floor, his thumbs on the floor, and he lifts up his body off the floor. It sounds kind of like some sort of handstand. Okay, and it was a bowing where his whole body ends up in the air. And so, it seems like he has to be someone who can do this kind of thing. But right, in addition to what we saw yesterday, he has to be wise and all the wealthy and all those other things. Seems like now he needs to know yoga. But there are Mepharshim who tell you, by the way, it's not like he had to know how to do this. It wasn't a criteria of a Kohen Gadol. He had to be good at yoga. But if he wasn't, he would find something else to do. But this was kind of an example of something he could do to keep him awake. Next thing, so how did they keep him busy? So it seems to be they kept him busy with music, which is interesting. They wouldn't use the harp or the lyre, they would use the mouth. In other words, they would sing to him to keep him awake, even though sometimes singing keeps you asleep. I guess it depends what kind of singing. And what would they say to him? Okay, so maybe bepeh actually doesn't mean to sing. Maybe it means they spoke to him. Okay, it wasn't music. And now we're going to see, because what would they say to him? They're trying to impart upon him the seriousness of this day. They said, listen, if God doesn't build this house, meaning if God doesn't bring himself here, then it was a waste that we built this house. So you better do this, l'shem shamayim, and you better stay up. Like, the people in Jerusalem, the important people in Jerusalem wouldn't sleep all night. Why? If you don't hear any noises at night, it's very easy to fall asleep. But if people are loud and making noise, so the people in Jerusalem would stay up, the Yekirei Yerushalayim, the important people, and they would make noise so that the Kohen Gadol wouldn't fall asleep. Tanya. Abishal Omer. So Abishal says, even outside of Jerusalem and not in the time of the temple, they would stay up all night Yom Kippur night in order to remember this. Okay, to remember that other people stayed up to keep the Kohen Gadol alive. So awake, so they would do this. But Abba Shaul says, but it led to all this bad behavior because people up all night, never a good thing, right? Men, women, all sorts of things can happen. Not a good thing, especially Yom Kippur night. You certainly don't want that to happen. And Amar Abai, Vitem Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Tirgum Naharda. They explained this was happening in Naharda. Obviously, Abba Shaul was right after the temple, and probably didn't happen in Naharda then, but it happened apparently in a later generation. To Amalei Eliyahu, the Rav Yehuda, Achua, the Rav Salah Hasida. We start to get this conversation of Eliyahu and Rav Yehuda, the brother of Rav Salah Hasida. And we're going to continue this tomorrow. In fact, I'll start back here tomorrow. Amaritu Amai Lo Atem Mashiach. He says to him, why didn't the Mashiach come? And Eliyahu answers him, there were men who slept with all these virgins in Nehardea on Yom Kippur night. And that's why the Mashiach hasn't come. To which, I'm going to leave you in suspense, to which Amar Leah, Kadosh Baruch Hu Mai Amar. So Rabbi Yehuda asks him, so what does God have to say about all this? And you'll have to wait till tomorrow to hear what God has to say about all this, although tomorrow's stuff will be posted soon, so you won't have to wait terribly long. Okay, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. We will pick up with this in tomorrow's stuff.